Guidetti, genius level mastermind, painter, entrepreneur, and warrior mage here once again to instruct your ass in the basics of figure drawing. Now in this drawing, this is a continuation of the last drawing that I did, which essentially we did the basic blocking. And now I'm going to show you how to break that blocking down. We're going to start by, first off, keeping the blocking stage for a second, correcting those blocking shapes, and then from there moving on towards the shadow shapes, right? The shadow shapes, and how to put that in, and then how to see the drawing from that point. And it depends on how far I go, but I could go through and start breaking the lines down a little bit more in the interest of the overall design. All right, so without further ado, let us get started. The first thing we do, what do we do? What do we do? We stare, we look at it, and we want to see if any proportions are incorrect, which obviously they are not, because I am a genius, except I did give her a badonkadonk butt. To an extent, I must say, but you know what? We're about to fix that. So let's go through and start breaking this down just a little bit. I'm gonna put that little crack in, and then we're just using straight lines, right? Straight lines, that's all we gotta do. And I'm seeing a couple things that are incorrect. I'm looking at this as an entire shape, and my shape is in fact a little bit off, and that's why we're keeping this blocking stage. And especially if the model is moving, right? We're working with a live figure potentially, and the model's gonna be moving, so we need to keep the drawing flexible. The main thing is working your technique in not pressing down too hard with the pencil, right? You don't wanna scar the paper with the pencil. Right? You just want it to kind of glide. The lines need to be firm enough where you can see the lines when you step back a little ways, right? But they can't be so firm that they essentially destroy the paper, right? Make it so that you can't erase. We need to be quick and spontaneous with everything. So at this point, let me just articulate exactly what I'm doing, how I'm thinking about this. To get points like this, right here, the knees and such, I'm taking into account the negative space in between the legs and trying to see this leg at the same time. And this is a little bit thin here, so I'm going to be adding a little bit of flesh, right? A little bit of flesh on. Very beautiful technique, if I may say so myself. Just wisping these on, one wisp at a time, as they say. I'm keeping the eraser in my left hand to gently massage the drawing, the lines into place, effortlessly, expertly. And we're just slowly hatching these lines out. In areas like this, you can do a lot of drawing and sculpting with the eraser. So I am, in a sense, adding on to the detail right here, just a little bit. Detail meaning breaking the lines down a little bit, but that's in the interest of seeing the overall shape, right? You always want to be working in the overall shape. You never want to be piecemealing this bitch, right? We have to be looking at the entire shape all at once. Now, I'm not using sight size here, but I've spoken about this extensively before in a previous sight size video. Sight size is an excellent tool. It's essentially drawing whatever you're drawing, the same size that you see it, right? Same size that you see it. Now, a lot of idiots think that, oh, that means to the exclusion of, comparative measurements. In other words, they're thinking just because I use sight size, we're not supposed to be doing comparative measurements. I think that's bullshit. You're always supposed to be using comparative measurements, measuring off of other points, and just using your brain in general. That's what makes us superior artists. Right? We need to flex our brains. We need to flex the gray matter, that lump that sits 3 feet above your ass. Always flex it, man. You got to flex it. Not sure that made sense. I don't really remember what I said, but I said it. All right, so at this point, I am breaking these lines down just a little bit. And it's a little bit too rounded, and this is actually a good example of something becoming a little bit too generalized. This shape right here is definitely too large, but do we just bring this in? I'm not sure quite yet, because we also need to take this other side into account. I don't want to bring this in and make this too thin. but I do think it needs to go in just a little bit, fortunately enough for me. But it also could be as well that this arm right here moves over that way a little bit, which I am a little bit more inclined to do because I'm looking at this shape right here, and that shape is in fact a little bit off. So I'm going to shift this line over. So the main point I want to put in this video is, you know, look, it's important to learn the basic blocking stage, right? And we need to get the blocking, but a mistake a lot of beginners make is that at that point they don't spend time in the block-in to correct what they have done, right? So it's like they got the straight lines, but the lines are off and then they don't correct them. And it's okay to start breaking the lines down some at this point. But the only reason why I would break them down is that the big basic lines themselves are correct, and the only way to get closer to the reality of the entire drawing is to actually break down certain points. Like right here was an example. This needed to widen up some, and in fact I did widen this up down here, but then it just needed to be widened up top for it to work, right? Another thing we could be doing at this stage is putting in basic shadow shapes, but the reason why I'm refraining is because I like to train my eye to see the proportions in the basic stage, this very basic stage, right? Basic stage. And doing so, it gives yourself more practice. And if you can see the proportions at the very basic stage, right? Think of what you can do when you add more information. And the other thing is sometimes when we add the more information in, it kind of, we add the information in, but because the basic shapes were incorrect to begin with, right? That information we added is in fact incorrect, and we've kind of slowed ourselves down in the process, right? Another thing that I don't think I've spoken about that much, which I think I need to do a little bit more, is a drawing, and I've said this, but let's apply this to this drawing specifically. A drawing is an artist's understanding of what they are looking at. Well, the more figure drawings you do, the more anatomy you're going to understand, the more you're going to be able to predict, in a sense, what happens with a model based off your experience and such. So we need to be thinking about the anatomy. We need to be sculptors, we painters. We need to be sculptors. We need to be thinking exactly just what the f we're supposed to be doing, right? Three-dimensionally. This is a two-dimensional drawing, but we're supposed to trick the eye and the viewer into thinking it is three-dimensional. Three-dimensional. We need to think like sculptors. We can't be little bitches and just do a 2D drawing and say, why doesn't it look good? It's gonna look 2D if you think 2D. Always think 3D, bitch. Or in my case, 8D. Put that together if you can. Don't know what I said, but I said it. All right, so I'm doing these very subtle lines. I am definitely making changes. I'm not just going over this right here. And I am, in fact, trying to see the entire shape all at once. Now, being that I am highly trained professional mastermind, genius mastermind, I rarely ever, in fact, I never make mistakes. I've never made a mistake. I don't know how it feels, so I'm just kind of humoring you by pretending to go over these lines right here, but in fact they're all correct. They're definitely correct. Okay, I definitely, you know, I'm just doing this video for you guys. I don't need to correct this stuff. If I wanted to, I could just start shading and magically the drawing would appear and you'd give me 5 minutes, I'll have a finished copy, right? That's just how it is. But I don't like to brag. Ugh. Garb is falling off. All right, there we go. So we're slowly hatching this out, slowly hatching it out. Now this is looking kind of like a hunchback of Notre Dame right here, so I'm just going, at least to my eye, because my eye is highly trained, to slowly put these marks in. Now, I am trying to do straight lines. If you do straight lines, it forces yourself to see the actual angles. The angles, right? We need to learn to see the basic angles, the basic shapes. And you know, I'm constantly trying to, let's specify this because this is a great example of what not to do, right? This is a great example of what not to do. Let us start from here. Now, to do this, I'm not just going to judge off of this point right here, because I think actually this might need to drop. Nah, this is probably okay, but let me look over here. I'm going to start from here. I'm going to see this whole shape to draw this. All right? And this is good practice. And it is practice, but to practice, you have to kind of understand, you have to know it first, right? You have to, somebody has to say, hey, bitch, take a look at this. And then you have to try to uncross your eyes, which is very hard for most of us, except myself. And then we practice trying to see this. And, you know, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of work. That's why only the strong survive, as they should. Forgot where I was going with that, but I said it. Okay, working on this side, I blocked this in. Is it correct? Not quite, but from here, I'm going to see this line here, and then I'm going to try to see this at the same time. So I see 1, 2, and I'm just going to draw these at the same time. We're drawing chunks of the body, right? We're not just drawing one line here. Now, this is very important when we're drawing with a live model, when we're drawing the live model, right? It's important because the live model is going to move. And when he or she or it moves, right, then we need to understand how that part moves. So in other words, if we're drawing the leg moves. If we're only drawing one side of it and then we wait to draw this other side, we're going to have 2 different positions because we drew them both when they were in different positions from themselves. So we need to learn to draw the whole shape at once. And I think too, drawing in this very basic simplified method is going to greatly increase your skills. You're going to level up, if you will. Not that I play any games or anything. I'm not a nerd. I have a life.
Where are you?
All right.
I'm eating. Could you slow him? Just
As you
slow.
can tell.
Slow. I put a slow. It didn't
Right.
do anything.
So we're just hatching out in the peduncle region right here. And for the sake of, here's the thing. I could continuously work on this. Oh, and let me go down to, I'm going to get down to the feet. I could continuously work on this, but for the sake of the video, we're showing the step-by-step process. It might not be as accurate.
Sheeped him.
I'm doing that on purpose so that you lesser
First thing,
beings
I died.
don't feel left out. Okay. Now I'm going to go down here to the footle region, as they say. Yes. And let's just pretend like stuff was wrong. Okay, let's pretend like stuff was wrong, and we're going to just fix a couple of these lines right here. Actually, this comes out just a little bit. All right, my dad is snoring in the background. I'm not sure y'all can hear that. Okay. There we go. Just massage it into place. That's what we do, bitches. Massage the drawing into place. All right. Okay, and this point right here, this is a little bit vague. So I'm going to, in essence, define this right here. And so I'm using the eraser essentially just as much as I'm using the pencil, all right? Using the eraser just as much as I use the pencil. All right, so from here, I mean, it's looking okay. It's looking good enough to, I think at this point, go on to the next stage. So now we come up to the face, and I'm just going to mark where I see the nose. And these are the points I'm looking at. First off, the chin needs to drop just a little bit. 1, 2, there we go. We're just going to massage it into place. Eraser. Beautiful. Good job. Now, from here, I'm going to mark the top of her lip, and then the bottom shadow shape of her lip, right there. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the shadow shape of the chin and bring it right up this way. Probably should have put the ear in. I'm going to look at the nose, right? The nose, the bottom of the nose, and notice that the ear is slightly below it. I'm going to mark the ear there. How far from the back of the head is the ear? It's about there, and it's coming up at this angle, so I'm looking at this shape right here as I draw this side of the ear. Okay? And then how high is going to be probably about this high. If this is here, somewhere here, like that, and then we can also come across here and see that the eyebrows are a little bit higher than this ear, so I'm going to go and put the eyebrows in while looking at this part of the face at the same time. And then where does the temple break, right? Where the eyebrows kind of fold around, if you will, somewhere around here, pulling at that angle. So this is how we're thinking about now. What do we do? Let's just hatch this out. How far are the eyebrows out? Somewhere around there. Now, you don't even need to be this detailed with it. I'm going to just soften that edge right there, which that was kind of stupid. So let's do this. Cut that off just a little bit. Now, I'm going to have to shape this, right? Shaping this, but this is a rough block in for the ears and the face, what have you. Let's get a little bit more precise with this because it's not really working yet. I'm going to have to bring this down just a tad bit, just a smidge. There we go. And cut, tap, pull, erase. That's how we do it. All right, now, roughly, oh, and then the jawline, which comes up here like this. Bazing, bazang, bazitch. All right. From this point, we're going to squint down, and we can be squinting the whole time, in fact. It's very good to be able to squint, simplify what you see. And I'm going to block the basic shadow shapes in, and I'm just going to put the shadow edge in, okay? And I'm going to make it very soft, a soft line edge where the body is, and maybe a little bit sharper, right? Where it is sharp, but in doing so, we can get the impression just in linear form, in line form, okay? And keep in mind, okay? Keep in mind that we can still change all these lines. They're still very soft, okay? Now, I am squinting. This is how I look right here. This is how I'm squinting. I'm not squinting all the way down so I can't see what the hell I'm doing, but I am essentially squinting down and unifying everything right here. And let's just go through, and I'm going to make this a soft edge. You don't want to make sharp edges on the body, okay? And the reason you don't want to make sharp edges on the body is because it will stop the light impression, and it makes it look like the figure actually is cut, right? There's a cut, there's a groove or something. It breaks the figure up in a very disturbing, cruel manner. So I'm squinting down. Squinting will unify the shadows. Now, squinting is probably, aside from learning how to construct the figure, one of the most important things you morons should learn, okay, potentially can learn, okay? And I am taking into account your pea-sized brains, right? But it's one of the most important things you can learn. And in putting these shadow shapes in, I'm also going to correct some of the shapes just a little bit, right? And in a drawing this size, just skimming the line and making something a line width thicker is actually a big change in a drawing. So the smaller you draw, in my opinion, the harder, and which is correct because it is my opinion, the harder it's going to be to get the proportions accurate, right? So now these lines in here, this is kind of, all of this is kind of dark. All of this is kind of dark down here. So what do we do at this stage? Every time we add new information in, this is what I want everybody thinking. Every time we add new information in, do not develop it past that, but correct the big shapes and correct the proportions. That is the name of the game. All right, that's huge. In fact, the whole point of this video, because what did we do? We started off with basic blocking and then we developed it, right? We developed this. That's what we got to do, man. Get yourself some lines, man. Okay, the face. Let's get up here to the face. I'm going to do the same thing to the face, right? The face. Get the face. And look, all these shapes, all this stuff, if I wanted to, I could just swipe through and erase most of the drawing, okay? I could just erase this. And let's just develop this just a little bit in the interest of getting the overall, the bigger shape, all right, the bigger picture. And this is actually going to have to come out just a little bit. So we're making these very tiny changes. So then whoops, there's a line like that, and then a line coming up like that. And now I'm going to add on to the face. And also, I was going to say, this seems a little bit, the point from the eyebrow up to the top of the head seems a little bit small, but I think this change possibly will rectify that. And if not, then I can just incrementally bring it up. But when we're making changes, it's important to be looking at the entire shape, because it's very easy to make the head obviously too big or too small. So we need to be aware of these types of changes. Always, when you're making a change, making something, whether it's wider or longer or what have you, always measure off a couple different points and try to go as far across the body as you can, and then step back here and see the overall image, right? The overall shape. Overall shape. That's what we do. Okay. Nose here. I'm just going to specify the nose shape just a little bit here, and then let's clean this up. So notice, for the most part, the drawing is in fact developing. Let's correct this hand, because this hand's a little bit, it looks like flipper or something. I mean, it's a little bit long, okay? So this actually comes in some, and then we're going to chop this in some too. So we're making these changes. And here's the thing, we make these errors, and then we need to learn how to fix these mistakes. But sometimes it's not that we made a mistake. Sometimes we drew it totally right, but then the figure will move into a very beautiful position. That, my friends, is why we need to be able to move things on a dime. We need to be able to keep it in a flexible state, namely keeping it so that it's not drawn, it's not scarred into the paper. We need to develop the control of hand, right? And patience of mind to develop it like this, so that we can make the changes if and when we need to. So important, right? Now, I've been working for a long time, and I do good drawings, and I do even better drawings. I never do bad drawings. But I will say that one of the most valuable lessons that I have learned is not getting discouraged no matter how bad something looks. It's not just about taking your time. That is part of it, and that's a huge part of it. But striving to understand the proper technique, striving to understand the proper teachings, and then practicing those and being patient with yourself, and then looking at the small victories. And that's the best mentality you can have as an artist, is sticking with this stuff, because you make the changes based off of what you see, but when you first start, you can't see shit. You just can't. So here, you start getting a little bit more detailed. You start understanding what it means to get the subtle angles, right? Subtle angles, not just the big, broad, basic angles. We worked on more yesterday. Now I am, in fact, breaking this down a little bit more. You learn what it takes to get the subtle angles here, all right? And all the while, we're trying to think of the mentality of the anatomy, rather, not mentality, but the anatomy. Okay. Now, shadow is atmosphere, form is light. So, what that means is that we're going to have certain areas in here that when we squint, this kind of unifies together, because we're going to have a compression of values, especially in Planthel, because Planthel doesn't have such a wide variety of values as paint, and paint also doesn't have the wide varieties of nature, of real life. So there's a degree of compressing those values, right? Make it make sense. They all have to play off each other, and Planthel is supposed to be a very light impression, at least. You can push it, I'm aware of this. However, in this particular demonstration, it's going to be quite compressed. Now, the neck to me is still a little bit thin, so I'm going to look at this entire shape here, measure off this point. This point is correct. This point, in fact, comes in just a hair width, so I'm going to do that. And then bring this in probably just a little bit as well. Just a smidge. And then from here, from this point here, I'm going to look and see that this point probably needs to come in just a slight bit. This is probably going to need to drop just a little bit. So even at this point, I've made changes. Actually, I'm not sure about this change right here, not yet, but I'm gonna go with it because I made that decision, and if I need to change it, I can. From here, let's put that little swoop into the arm, and in fact, I do believe that if you look at this shape right here, and I also came to this conclusion by looking at the anatomy that this in fact needs to drop down, I wouldn't say significantly, but that kind of is a significant drop, right? So it's something like this, which makes sense because now we can see this little piece right here, whereas before we couldn't. So art is or this type of drawing is very practical, it's very common sense, okay? We're just gonna keep that very basic since I'm moving this. Now, think if I took all the time in the world detailing that, right? And I had everything, oh, 1 second, my dad's getting up. What I was saying was, if I spent all the time in the world detailing this elbow right here, and going and trying to get the very subtle shape behind it, from the very start, I would have wasted a little bit more time because it was in fact the blocking was incorrect. But even at this stage where I've already started adding some of the shadow shapes and kind of getting some of the subtleties and such, breaking down the big lines and getting the smaller, more intricate lines done, I can still sculpt and fix the big shape. So all this stuff right here, I'm not really thinking I'm detailing as much as I'm thinking I am trying to get the large shape. So you see me doing these subtle angle breaks and such, but what this actually does come out some. So sometimes you ping pong back and forth. But what I'm thinking of, what I was saying is I'm thinking of the overall shape here. That's what I'm trying to focus on, right? I'm trying to focus and see the overall large shape. There's an angle that's coming this way, and then it kind of breaks and it comes up some, and it might not even be that sharp. And then at this point, I'm going to knife edge, pancake, whatever you want to call it, the eraser, and then we're going to come up into it as such. And so I'm looking and I'm trying to get the overall shape of the arm, the overall large impression of the arm, the large shape, whatever you want to call it, all the while trying to understand the model. Now in a live setting, you're also going to want to be keeping in mind if the model's moving, what's it doing, keeping in mind, oh, that's a very beautiful position. I wonder how often she gets into that position, what have you. And so these are the things that we always want to be keeping track of. I'm going to move this over just a little bit still, just a little bit, because it does need to move over some. This, in fact, does need to move over some. This a little bit more, so I'm incrementally bringing over. Ideally, you just swoop it over right from the start. So in other words, I think this just needs to be a little bit straighter. I was looking at this distance right here, right? And then trying to see this shape right here. And between those two, and looking at this shape right here, which is still a little bit incorrect. This is a little bit squat to me. But between those two shapes, in fact, I think this needs to drop down some. This part needs to come down. That's how I came to that conclusion. They were both saying that this needed to shift over. And so this is you always want to be measuring things off of multiple points, never just one, right? Never just one. So now I'm just going to try to see this as an entire shape right here to understand, to get this. But then at the same time as I'm seeing this, I'm going to try to see this shape right here. So I'm understanding it as a whole anatomy, right? So that is the idea. Also, let's get this point right here. This point right here, and let's make sure this is correct. In fact, just looking at it, needs to drop down just a slight bit. Let's go ahead and not be lazy and just clean that up with the eraser just a little bit. Okay, so now I have a solid point to measure off of. From here, where is the bottom of the belly button, which it drops just a slight bit, which makes sense because this needed to elongate slightly. So it goes one, and then it kind of flattens out like this. And then in fact, it comes in just a little bit there, like even less than that. And then I'm going to just touch the eraser. It might take a couple tries to get this. So we're trying to be precise. I understand like we can get the impression and get the, like everything much quicker. You can get that smooth flow to it and you can still make it look very beautiful. But this type of work, we're supposed to be trying to really push our limits, right? We're supposed to push ourselves to get, you know, a very highly precise figure and train our minds, our eyes to see and understand proportions, right? This is a push our limits exercise. And exercises like this, it's like a battle arena for training. It's really, these exercises, I think figure drawing is one of the most important things that you can do to better yourself, not just in figure drawing and painting, but also in landscape painting. It gives you a level of precision, delicacy, right, what have you. So that is essentially how I go about getting this. Now, at this point, I'm going to lightly shade the shadow shapes in, and then when I come back for the next video, I will correct those shadow shapes a little bit more, but we're going to shade them in right now, all right, just for the sake of it. So like I said, look, take everything step by step, but you want to take each step, you want to take your time with each step, all right? Now keep in mind that I am doing this shadowing in, but I can erase whatever I want to erase, right? And I'm keeping this relatively light, but I can erase what I want to erase with it. I don't need to, nothing is scarred, nothing is screwed, okay? All this stuff, I can shift, I can change. Now, we will notice that, and I'm going to soften this edge some, all right? We're trying to keep the impression. You will notice that when we add anything, it changes the way we see things, and we might see more things that need to change. We might have gone over something 5 times and said, oh, it's right on the third, fourth, and fifth time, and then because we add this type of shadowing in, right, then we see things that need to change. This also happens, and that is okay. That's actually normal, okay? Right? So you can kind of see this taking shape. I'm just going to bring this down in value just a little bit. It's important to take your time in the shadow shape. You know, just take your time shadowing and stuff. Like I said, with this drawing in particular, this arm is a little bit thin. I do see that right now, but I'm going to, I can still correct it. My goal is just to kind of get a point across and to give a clear understanding of exactly the process of figure drawing, when to shade, when not to shade, and what have you, where to go from there. All right. But every step needs to be used to get the larger shape. Always be striving for the larger shape. Always try to see the proportions that you are having trouble seeing, right? Because even this is a very basic blocking, and really I understand this is a little bit longer of a video. However, in the scheme of things, it's not that long for a figure drawing like this. And I am rushing this through to try to give you guys a holistic example of just what the hell is going on when we do figures, right? The ankles here, really quick. Whoops. Really quick, I like to really just mark the ankles in. 1, and then 2. Just mark them in and take your time with them. Okay? It doesn't need to be totally correct, but that's more or less the way we can go about doing it. It's kind of like a downward arrow or something, and I do in fact need to clean that up. The shadow shapes here need to be a little bit more defined. But at this point, what I would recommend, once we have this basic shape, we have something we have to work with right here. Now it's just like in paint. In paint, we work with lights and darks, and now we can, in fact, I have a cramp. we can really work with lights and darks. We can squint down, for example, you know, and we can keep on refining this. I'm going to refine this just a little bit more for you turds. Right? And I'm squinting down, like I said, I've said this 1,000 times, I'm just squinting down. Just trying to get the light shape. I'm trying to unify these shapes, make everything seem just, it has form to it. We don't need to get all the subtle shapes in yet, just the big basic shapes, right? And so from here, we can clean it up with eraser, and we're going to continuously correct the form. So this, my friends, is just kind of a quick block in. This is how, this is how we get the shadow shapes in. This is the progression. And then at this stage, it's not that we are using this. I'm not thinking, oh, I need to refine, I need to refine. I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking I need to correct the drawing, I need to correct the proportions. And the shadow shapes now will notify me in a more obvious manner of what in fact does need to change. So now we're working with light shapes and dark shapes and such. And so, for example, right here, there's like no form up in here that I put, but for the thumb, I can start hatching out areas for the thumb, soften the edge and such, you know, and ditto with the fingers over on the other side, and then just do a combination of the eraser and the penthil and trying to hatch these areas out without scarring the paper. So we're keeping it light, and we're also thinking anatomically what's happening. This is a study. So we're learning a lot of things. We're learning exactly how to develop the drawing, how to control our hand, how to squint down, how to unify the lights and dark shapes, how to simplify something incredibly complex. And we're also trying to understand just what exactly is happening within the figure, right? So, my friends, this is how we do it. In the next video, I will further break this down. I don't know how far this is going to go, but just let me know if you find this helpful. All right, Louis Guidetti out.